Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's last panel, number 5, panelists. Here we are. Follow your little name cards down here. I shall stroll up here and talk you all one last time through the rules of engagement, through how this works, because it's a bit different to the normal panel format, and there's lots going on. So basically, we're going to go straight into opening remarks. You each get 3 minutes, but it's not normal 3 minutes where you can all, waffle on, not that any of you would. These panels at the side are going to fill up. That's 30 seconds you've got with the slidey thing. And then there we go. That's your 3 minutes is up. And that's if you really misbehave. We will not hesitate to activate the buzzer. Those of you watching at home on the live stream, hello. That's going out on Facebook Live all over Europe and beyond. There's a Twitter hashtag, which is EIF16, if you want to join in. So if people here inspire you, if you think, wow, that is an amazing stat, had not heard that before, don't keep it to yourself, share it with the world. And over here is Rafa, our live cartoonist, who is coming up with some very fine, very witty images based on what's being discussed here. So for this final panel tomorrow, How Will Europe Grow? We've got a great lineup. We've got McGuinness, MEP, who's Vice President of the European Parliament and a member of the Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development. Here's Groot, who is a business advisor at Agriterra, who represent farmers and agricultural cooperatives worldwide. We've got Bernd Naaf, who is from Bayer, sitting just here. Helena Jonsson is president of the Federation of Swedish Farmers, and Tynan is from Commissioner Hogan's cabinet. So I'm sure we'll have lots of insight to share with us about what the Commission is doing. Without further ado, let me join you guys down here and hand over to Mairead for the first 3 minutes. Tell us your thoughts.
Well, I hope I've got lots of bright ideas because I've just found this. So I presume I can stay sitting. In 3 minutes, about Europe and how it will grow, I think we need to have a conversation about what sort of agriculture we want. I think there are two polarized positions on agriculture, one which talks about extensive organic, and another which talks about intensive and production. And I wish that we would have a conversation where the two could meet somewhere, because until we settle that question, I'm afraid we're not going to get any consensus. We know that we need to produce more food, but we equally know that in terms of the environmental challenge, it's absolutely huge. So lots of things are going to happen into the future. Diets will change. I think that's a likelihood. But land will not increase. There will be less land available for food production. We're having a very big conversation in the Agriculture Committee about land and ownership and access to land. And I think that's deeply important in this debate. The next question is, how do we use that land? Do we allow more space for nature? And therefore, do we intensify the land that is under real agriculture production? What I would like to see is that we would link better the environmental issues into our agriculture production systems, that we would spend more on research and innovation, but much more important to me is that we would understand the value of extension services. Knowledge is no good unless people have it and use it. And I think all the member states have failed in this area. Some have pulled back completely in terms of spending public money on this issue, which I believe is a public good. In Ireland, for example, we are looking at discussion groups. So farmers come together around one advisor and they share ideas, they learn from each other, and they also have social interaction, which I think is hugely important. I think other member states need to look at what they're not doing. I think commercial companies are very involved in this, and that's welcome. But I do think there is a role for governments and public policy to say food is fundamental, the environment is vital, we need to do more with less, and therefore we need that public money is spent on the research, on the innovation, but particularly on the extension services. Never underestimate the interpersonal connections and how that, in fact, allows people learn from each other and do things better. And I suppose my very final point around environment versus agriculture, let's give up that debate. It's environment and agriculture. And you said I'm a member of the Agriculture Committee, and I am a proud one, but I'm also on the Envy Committee. And more it is the issues on the Environment Committee that are particularly pertinent to the Agriculture Committee. So there's almost a synergy there, and we shouldn't feel threatened by that. We should feel that that is the way of the future. Many farmers farm environmentally and want to be sustainable, but they want to make a living as well. And I think that's where our biggest challenge is. How do we make sure that farmers can make a living from what they do and feel valued by society in terms of support from the public purse and also from the marketplace? So I think we have a lot of work to do on the food supply chain as well as at the production end. A huge amount to do around that public policy area and the science and innovation and the extension services so that we get a sustainable agriculture into the future, because guess what we did? We allowed productivity in Europe and agriculture to decline because we pulled away from it. Years ago, agriculture was not a sexy topic. It was a bore because this part of the world was well fed and felt it didn't need, therefore, to invest in agriculture. The minute you stop investing in a sector, it dies. Let's not allow that happen.
Perfect.
I see the yellow flag.
No, that is an absolutely fantastic opening statement. Loads to think about there. All the big debates, environment, where do we go, the integration of technology, digital farming, those kind of things. I think we should come to Luke next to see, to get a farmer's perspective. Sir.
Yeah, I think a lot of valid points have been said. I think that talking about priorities of the European Union, I think that some good steps have been made by the European Commission in the last term by beefing up the budget for research, by starting the European Innovation Partnership for Agriculture, which is a very good approach, I think, because it combines what Mrs. McGuinness was saying about the different actors in the chain, how they innovate together. So they call it, I think, the multi-actor approach. But still, if you see the budget which is being attributed for these kind of innovative ways of producing in the future, it's very small if you compare it with other sectors, but also if you look at it from a perspective in percentage of GDP. I think that from my perspective, I work mainly in Asia nowadays, so I'm also here a little bit to reflect on are there similarities, are there differences? I think that innovation is very key in every aspect, and I feel that we tend to talk a lot about effectivity and efficiency here in Europe, but I think that the biggest gaps to be overcome are actually in Asia and Africa when it comes to productivity, and we talk about innovation. And I think that there's also a lot of opportunities for people from the farming community, but also from private companies to bring there some good innovative products. I know many of them. We now have soil scanners, for example, which we can scan soil on a very with small-sized farmers, smallholder farmers, which will benefit directly with producing more on their land. So I think we really should also look at opportunities on how we can use the innovation we already have, because we are also sometimes a little bit too pessimistic, I think, about innovation in the European Union. And if you talk about big companies like Bayer, but also other companies, they have had big success, and they are very crucial in the world economy. And I think we should also look and discuss on how can we benefit from the innovative ideas we have in Europe, and how can we make sure that life also becomes better in countries like in Asia or in Africa. So I just want to keep it to that. And only last remark, also what Ms. McGuinness said, I think that we should be careful to throw away all our public experiences and all our investments in research and innovation, because if you look at the past, the most important innovations are being done by governments. Like microchips, for example, are made by governments, by Pentagon. So, and you see a tendency that people, and especially governments, they tend to step back and say, okay, but private companies should take the floor, but they are more or less also innovating for products which are already on the market and not solving problems which are there and which they don't have to do anything with. So if you talk about less consumption, who's going to be worried about less consumption? Which company? Consumptions are about more consumption in the end. So we should really, from a public perspective, also guard these kind of key issues we have as the European Union, and I think that that's where the public authorities should step in. So.
Okay, so sometimes more is more. Bernd, would you like to speak next? Tell us about Bayer's views.
Well, I'm glad that I'm the third one and not the last one, I must say. I mean, so many very, very important comments already made. Well, what I'd like to add here is, first of all, I'm really pleased to be able to join this discussion round. During my career with Bayer, I've had opportunities to work in many different countries, very different markets, the US, Asia, as well as Europe. And I've, let's say, been in contact with all kinds of agriculture and agricultural setups. And it's been a fantastic journey. What it taught me is that we really have to support all kinds of agriculture. And we need, of course, to provide innovation to be able to tackle those challenges, which Luke, you also referred to just in your comments. And it's quite amazing that, unfortunately, food production, food as such, and agriculture don't receive the recognition, particularly in Europe, which they ought to have. And if we are honest, it's nice to go to the supermarkets and buy some produce, but not many people really think about what it took actually to have this food in the shelf. And that's something which we have taken up on our agenda as well, to actually help to provide clarity. We used to say educate, but I think it's to provide clarity on food production and on the importance of agriculture. It is tremendously undervalued. And then we come to our contributions as far as helping farmers to provide adequate but also high quality and safe food in a sustainable way. And it's a fantastic topic. I can only emphasize on that again. So Europe plays a tremendous role. We believe that we don't have any food issues. That's true, because we can afford to also import as much as we want. Fact is, we do have, let's say, a food shortage so far that we still need to import quite considerable amounts of food. So we can also get better here. But it does require also the recognition of society that agriculture needs to do the job, again, in a very sustainable way. That's very important. And also, let's say, recognizing biodiversity and all the other aspects to protect the environment. And this is really a fantastic challenge, a fantastic objective also for us to contribute here.
Great, Ben, thank you so much. I suppose we should hear from the farmers now. Helena, at a national level, do farmers have the necessary information and skills to innovate? Is it something your members are interested in? Tell us about your experience.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'm the president of the Federation of Swedish Farmers, the LRF, and LRF represents some 140,000 members in the green sector and our companies. Amongst this is 70,000 farm enterprises. I have a farm in the highlands of the south of Sweden, where we breed Hereford cattle together with my family. In our everyday work, digitalization, as well as the latest innovation, are crucial parts of running our business. For example, DNA testing, scanning, breeding evolution by big data. We also run a web-based auction site where we sell both our own cattle and others. So it's a bit of innovation, maybe. What we can see is now that we have a fundamental change with the digitalization of the agriculture sector. And digitalization will make it possible for us farmers to make better decisions regarding management. And I would like to mention the N sensor as an example. This is a technology which automatically adapts the amount of nitrogen to the color of the plant. The greener the plant, the less nitrogen it needs. This will lead to more even quality over the field, and at the end of the day, a higher yield. What I want to stress with this example is the fact that the relation between risk and profit could be altered thanks to more extensive use of digital tools. This will make it more attractive to invest in the sector. One of the big challenges having to do with digitalization is the use of big data. Who owns it? How can it be shared? And who will profit from it? As you all know, farmers operate in rural areas, while innovation are said to thrive in urban areas. This is due to the fact that different competencies are geographically closer together in the urban areas and referred to as the coffee machine effect. You simply run into someone by the coffee machine and start to chat. And this happens less often when it's kilometers to your nearest neighbor, of course. Here we see that the digitalization can help shorten the geographic distance between people and help solve a bit of this problem. So to sum up, you could say that to have a good climate for innovation, you need freedom as an entrepreneur, not a lot of detailed regulation. You need profitability. And you also have to focus on 3 areas. Digitalize the whole European Union. All regions are equally important to develop regardless of their current level. Secure long-time financing of research combined with short-term innovation projects, and transferring knowledge and research result and make sure that these are easily accessible to the companies in order for them to develop the company itself as well as Europe as a whole. Thank you.
Perfect. Lots of interesting things there for us to pick up on in the discussion. And finally, Tom, do you want to give us an insight into Commissioner Hogan's priorities?
Well, I suppose the first thing to say is that we all know the world faces significant challenges, and we know the numbers as regards population increase, so that we know that by 2050 there'll be nearly another 2.5 billion people on the planet, and that we have to increase production by 70% between now and 2050. Coupled with that, as Mairead has said, you have got the whole greenhouse gas challenge, COP21, international agreements. They're going to have an influence on agricultural policy. From a farming perspective, and Helena's touched on it, the challenge is to produce more using less. And, you know, we're already involved in developments in relation to doing that, and I'll touch on that as well. And then if you look at this week was an important week from an agricultural policy perspective as well, because we had our Economic Outlook Conference, 2 days. The second day was for anoraks, in terms of policy wonks. The first day was for politicians. On the first day, President Juncker and Commissioner Hogan spoke about finding a new pathway as regards reorientation of the CAP to help Europe meet those challenges. And all the issues that have been raised, very eloquently raised by the speakers here, are all part of that agenda. And then, of course, in September, and LRF, Helene's organisation, were involved. We had the Cork 2 declaration. We had a focus on rural development, rural areas, revitalising rural areas. And I suppose the key for me in relation to that was we had 340 stakeholders from right across the European Union present in Cork. And we agreed a 10-point declaration by consensus. I think if it had to be put to the audience, it would have been 100% approval, which sends a signal in itself. And the Crop Protection Association, which Bayer, a member, they were present as well, and made a very valuable contribution. So that declaration is calling for effective support in relation to climate mitigation, adaptation strategies, and going beyond carbon-based solutions. So if you look at that declaration versus the previous one, 20 years ago in 1996, we didn't have any discussion about digitization or climate change, etc., or carbon. Now, Mairead touched on the knowledge economy, and she's absolutely spot on as always, and Helena did the same. So farmers deserve the access to state-of-the-art connectivity, ICT tools, discussion groups and networks. And digitization and connectivity are particularly important. But when you look at it from a rural Europe perspective, only 25% of rural Europe has access to ultra-fast broadband. So, you know, straight away, we're behind the 8 ball in terms of that. Helena touched on big data, precision farming, allow us to produce more efficiently. Bayer are a practitioner of that, in the sense that if a farm half an hour from here, where you can look at precision agriculture, you can look at biological control, you can look at integrated pest management. It's all about using less inputs per kilogram of output. And then the whole research side, investing in research and innovation for food-related challenges that our society is facing. That's what it's about. And Lou touched on Horizon 2020. And that's our research and innovation framework. And we have doubled that funding between FP7 and Horizon 2020, from 40 billion to 80 billion. But I agree absolutely with Luke. It looks like an awful lot of money, but we need more. We definitely need more. And the other thing about Horizon 2020, it's so competitive that only 10% of applications are successful. So that sends a signal in itself. Then Luke also touched on EIP Agri, which is a new policy tool that we have in place. Very effective. It's in our current RDP program. I can tell the audience that there's about 3,200 operational groups already formed across 118 rural development programs across the European Union. And it involves the various actors coming together, multi-actor approaches, as Luke outlined. Then we have the Juncker Plan, European Fund for Strategic Investments. What can we do there? We're looking at trying to link the two, RDP and EFSI. Juncker talks about big infrastructure projects, and we need that on water. We need it in terms of connectivity and big infrastructure projects. So we're looking at that to see what we can do. The point was made here, I think Mairead, Luke made it, and I think Helena made it as well, about the role EIB can play. I mean, this is the European Bank, owned by 28 member states, with a huge role to play. And anybody that's listening to Commissioner Hogan knows the sort of pressure he's put on EIB. But slowly but surely, I think we're getting there. They certainly bought into the big projects, which are low risk, but we need to get deeper in terms of the broader European project. So I suppose in summary, I'd say, agriculture has always developed new practices and techniques. We go back to our own member states, you can think of farmers, you grew up farmers' sons, and how creative and innovative they are in terms of new solutions. So, and innovation is a prerequisite for maintaining the progress that we've made. So then it's about linkages, interactions, collaborations, synergies across the whole food system. That started, we have to keep the momentum going and all work together to achieve that.
Great. Okay, lots to think about there. Who wants to kick us off in terms of following up? Mairead.
Can I ask the audience a question?
Please do.
Who has access to high-speed broadband in their region or home? You can see that the person who asked the question does not. And therefore, I feel your pain in the sense of, I live on a farm as well. So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I think that is a crucial issue for rural Europe. And I think those who have access do not understand how awful it is when you don't. My children know very well when they come home and realise that it doesn't work in that room, but it might work somewhere else. So we need investment there. And it will happen, but it certainly is a drawback to those who wish to be innovative. So that's a key point for me. In terms then of the role of the EIB, I think Tom very well spoke to that point, and that's absolutely essential. But we also need to address the issue of economic sustainability, and people will innovate if they feel that they're getting a return. There's an excitement around agriculture when product is in short supply and prices rise. Farmers respond to these signals. And I think the last year has been difficult. I hope we're moving to a different place where commodity prices will rise. But it's been a tough time, and farmers cannot spend when they're not making a return. So I think we haven't solved the volatility problems at farm level to allow them to take all of these innovations. But they get mixed signals from policymakers, and I put my hand up because I'm one of those, about what sort of agriculture we want. And I'd love to hear from my colleagues around the table, do they see that policy conflict? And how do they see it being resolved? Because I know that President Juncker was presented with a sustainability paper. And in that paper on agriculture, it was a look to the past, in my view, not the future. And therefore, I think until we solve this issue about what type of agriculture we want, or whether we can have different systems, and maybe that's the way to look forward, that one is not better than the other, then we're not going to find the right solutions to allow those different agriculture models to develop. So I would love to hear what the wisdom around the table is on that issue.
That sounds great. And I'd also like to broaden out the discussion about rural broadband. In one of the earlier panels, we were talking about the use of FC to kind of leverage investment in that. And we had some very interesting interventions from the telecom sector, from people in the Commission, in the Parliament, on how you really get the ball rolling in terms of broadband investment. Because it's great for us all to sit here in a city going like, oh, wow, urban digital hubs, hashtag mind blown. But how does that work in the countryside? And indeed, can it even be wider than just connecting farmers, but also kind of reinvigorate a whole rural economy. I don't know who would like to come in there.
Yes, I would like to really follow up on what the former speaker said concerning innovation. I think there is generally a kind of fear towards innovation, or in this respect, modern agriculture. And we need to find ways and means to bring it, let's say, better and more convincingly and trustworthy across to society. And Tom, you mentioned the Forward Farm, which we have near Brussels, which we use as, let's say, a best practice farming example to demonstrate what sustainable agriculture means, what soil conservation means, what water management means. And it's fantastic not only to have politicians visit this farm, but also schools and other members of society. And I can only re-emphasize the importance of doing so. And the farmer himself or herself need to get very much engaged. The farm needs to be somewhat open to the public, to be able to demonstrate how they actually practice agriculture and for what actually it is worth.
Great. Helena, perhaps you'd like to come in. I'm especially intrigued by the idea of your online cattle auction, because I've been to a real-life cattle auction. It's very loud, so I don't even know how this would work online. Do you want to tell us some more about your
Well, we got
connectivity?
the idea when we bought a car in that kind of auction. So a good friend of us helped us build the page. And you just put out a group of animals or one animal on display, and you say, this is an auction that will go on to Thursday night at 6 o'clock. And the bidders can put in an offer at any time they choose. And when it comes close to 6 o'clock Thursday night, if you put in a bid at exactly 6 o'clock, the auction will go on for 5 more minutes. So you can keep on a little bit further than 6 o'clock. And then we have a buyer. So it's just a way of connecting people who wants to sell animals and people who wants to buy them.
Please tell me, is it called Amuzon? Sorry. the auction's called Amuzon. Like. Or no, yeah, it would be great, wouldn't it?
It's a very silent auction.
Oh,
yes.
Much calmer. But I guess that wouldn't be possible without, right, you must have very high-speed broadband in your bit of...
Not very high speed, but we have a kind of broadband, but not very good, really.
Oh, okay. And so, Tom, Luke, there's more widely, right, bringing other benefits to rural communities, having broadband and things.
Yeah, I think, I think that digitalization is a very good thing for especially also youth in rural areas, because one thing is, of course, serving the farmer, new digital solutions and innovations. I mean, I know farmers who can now fix their milking robot with their phones, and they couldn't do that in the past, so they can go to a family party and without being hesitant if they have to drive back 50 kilometers because the milking robot doesn't work. So on farm it has benefits. Also it has disadvantages because you need less and less people to work on farms. So in the past my grandfather had 30 cows with 5 helpers, and they were all part of the rural community and area, and this is called vital rural areas, I think, because there was a lot of life, etc. So the more innovation is also sometimes has downsides, because there's less labor needed. But on the other hand, if you have rural broadband, like my biggest dream is living in the countryside and doing the work I do from my house with my computer. But now it's very difficult, for example, for web developers or for modern work to work from the countryside. But I think that a lot of young people would like to work outside of the cities. I mean, it's more like a necessity to move to urban areas. So if this could be solved by, for example, rural broadband, I think that there are many opportunities.
Great, and Tom?
The only thing I can say, and it was touched in terms of the rural development program that we have, in the current program, we reckon we'll be rolling it out to about 18 million rural citizens. So when you look at the funding, and Mairead touched on that, the importance of this budget that we have, 56 or 57 billion looks an awful lot of money, and it is. the rural development program over the 6-7 years that we have it, including national contributions, about 160 billion. So the European taxpayer is putting in 100. Then you'd have to ask yourself, can we leverage that? And maybe that's where the EIB can come into play as well. There probably is a better way of getting more of a bang for that money and that funding.
Great. Before we open the floor to questions, I wonder if we could just talk briefly about IP, because it's always intrigued me. When I was at the Wall Street Journal, I wrote a feature on Belgian fries. And to do that, I went to, what was it called? Pom Expo something. It's the world's biggest potato trade fair. And it was held in just in Flanders. And so I went there. I was like, it's going to be great. I'll do some reporting, eat some fries, and I had a great time reporting the story, but I had no idea there was like IP for potatoes. So the Belgian fry is made of a potato called the Bincher. It's a Dutch variety. It's about 100 years old. But it doesn't deal at all well with climate change, right? To grow Bincher well, you need a hot summer and a cold winter. And now it's kind of rainy all year round. It's really suffering. And Belgian farmers are like, what potato can we grow instead that, will still make the same amazingly delicious fries this country is famous for, but will actually survive the new conditions? So they were telling me about, here's our potato, it's patent number whatever. And I was astounded. I had no idea that you had these kind of royalties and things on them. So obviously IP very important in that sense, in the innovation science end, and also kind of in terms of the end product of much agriculture, in terms of PDOs, because that's something that makes Europe so famous. People love our cheeses and hams, they get exported worldwide, and that's a big part of defending what they are. So I guess, Bernd, do you want to tell us about your IP portfolio?
Well, IP is a very important topic, and I think it requires a little bit of explanations. For us, innovation is also a high commitment towards investment. I mean, we have to invest about 230 million euros now to develop a new crop protection product, and it is also very expensive, for instance, to develop new seed varieties. So to be able to, let's say, afford also these innovations in the future, of course, our intellectual property needs to be protected. At the same time, we consider it as equally important that also there is access to this innovation. And therefore, for instance, on the seed side, we consider it of utmost importance to make our innovation available via licensing agreements so that also other companies can benefit from this.
Great. Mairead, is this something you're working on in the Parliament? Or?
Well, it can be a controversial issue about, breeding rights and access to seeds and farmers saving seeds. So it is quite a controversial issue. But I think you point out very well in your comments about the need for new varieties to be developed, and therefore ongoing research is required. And I think I made the point that I believe there is a role for the public sector in this, not just to rely on the private sector. And I think there can be good partnerships in both of these areas. But I wanted to come back to a point that Tom made about the demand for food in the next decades. And I think one of the things we're going to have to do better in Europe and acknowledge is our need to allow Africa, and you referenced it as well, Luke, to develop their agriculture. And we need to do that from a very selfish perspective, because we have a migration crisis which is caused by economic issues and lack of development. We know that you need to develop an agriculture to develop a country, so we know this is our own history, and I think we can provide the knowledge, the know-how, the expertise to support that. So, because Europe isn't going to produce the food for the world, that's absolutely clear. We can do some, but it's not the solution to the global question. But we do have a duty, I think, to help with the development question in Africa and elsewhere. And we should let them learn from our mistakes so that they don't repeat some of the things that we did. To another point around, I think you mentioned regulation, if I took my notes down correctly. One of the things that farmers are furious about is rules and regulations that tell them when they have to do things and possibly why and how. And on the when part, I think there needs to be a re-examination of farming by dates, which happens in some member states, that things are allowed at this date but not at another. And I think if we were to link all of our knowledge around environment and weather and soil temperatures and all of these other, we have all the information, the big data is there, and provide farmers with an indication of when is the right time to put fertilizer out or not to put fertilizer out, when to put slurry out and not to do it, and allow them be farmers rather than be instructed as to when they do things, I think we'd get a better response from the farming community, because it is one of the big frustrations. And yet I think there's also an understanding that the reason we have these rules is that past practices caused problems. I remember I worked on a television program in 1980 called, what was it called? Landmark, back in the day when we had film and people spliced and cut things together. That makes me very old. But we told them at that time, farmers, it was like an instruction program, how to drain the land, rip out the hedgerows, make the fields bigger, produce and grow and expand. And this was public policy. When I finished in journalism by the end of 2003, early 2004, the program I then worked on was called Ear to the Ground. It's still alive and well. We were telling farmers about how to plant hedgerows, the same ones that we ripped out, how not to drain the land because actually we need places to flood, and how to look after the birds and the bees and all of these things. So policy making has flipped, and farmers, to be fair to them, have come on all of those journeys with us. But I think they want to have a farm and an environment that is good and healthy and thriving. And I think they just need the information and the way to do that. But if I keep mentioning economic sustainability, I make no excuse for it. They need to know they can make a living from that. And if the public purse is not going to expand, because I think it will probably contract at a European Union level, then I'm afraid the food supply chain needs to cough up. And whether that's a challenge for us as consumers or as the entire supply chain to be more equitable, then it's a challenge that we really have to answer.
Great. Helena.
We've heard here today that sometimes we think that innovation is a bit scary. And I think it's connected also to that we sometimes see the future as a bit scary. I mean, when I was born, everything was supposed to be better and better. And my children, maybe they think the things will not just go on and be better and better and better. They have more concerns. And therefore, I think that you really have to have a goal in the future that is better than now. I mean, you have to have a story about what will be better. And what you should look to innovate is things that gives you more sustainability. And sustainability for me is three things. It's economic sustainability, and that's what you talk about when you say you have to make a profit. That's true, you have to make a profit. You have to innovate about risk management, to climate risk, climate mitigation, for example, plant breed, crop protection, things like that. But it's not only the economical sustainability, it's also about the environmental sustainability. You have to be more resource efficient. You have to have alternatives to chemical crop protection. You have to be more, have more knowledge about biodiversity and things like that. More methods, more innovation in that kind of thing. And the third part, I think that's the most forgotten part of the sustainability, is the social one. I mean, we have to have no business models. So we will have a better freedom for farmers. We have to have innovation when it comes to policy making and so forth. So I think that these three different things, the economic, the environmental, and the social sustainability, that's crucial to have in mind when you think innovation and future, because then you can really believe it will be better than today. Different, but better.
Yeah, then exactly, it's a time for, it's a hard time to find optimism, but we absolutely need to.
Yes.
Tom.
I just take it up in terms of, because a couple of people mentioned it, Helena mentioned it and Luke mentioned it, I think Mairead mentioned it as well, the whole concept of sensors. and you mentioned it from a nitrogen measurement perspective. And we should always compare ourselves to what the competition are at. But if you look at the States, the Farm Bureau in the States did a survey in the Midwest, in the wheat, corn-producing states as regards the use of sensor technology, and 40% of farmers across the Midwest are using sensors. Now, it's moved, when you think about that from a precision ag perspective, an environmental perspective, a cost-saving perspective, it's quite enormous. But you've moved on a step further on that one now as well, because you can now spread sensors by drones, and they're biodegradable. So you think about that as the next step in relation to that. And then we probably complicate this precision technology a bit as well, because even when you drill into it in the States, what's it about? It's about soil sampling, it's about nutrient management planning, variable rate fertilizer application. That's what it's about. It's built on that. And then the data collected is driving yield. So that's what precision ag is all about. And then you say to yourself, well, you know, people talked about money and investment. What money is going into it? Climate Corporation is a data modeling firm, okay? Monsanto and Bayer are in the process of acquiring Monsanto. Monsanto acquired Climate Corporation a couple of years ago for $930 million. Now, when you bring that to Europe, in the last couple of weeks, an Estonian company, Vital Fields, was acquired by Climate Corporation. Now, what do Vital Fields do? What they do is they allow farmers to track all the crop inputs to ensure compliance with EU environmental regulations. So just think about that. And Vital Fields is operating across 5 or 6 member states. So what I'm saying to you, you see the way it's evolving. It's about precision ag, producing more using less, minding our environmental footprint, and using all the available technologies that's there. Now, the missing link in that, and Mairead has touched on it as well, and so has Helena, is in terms of knowledge transfer and how we can do that. Because Helena's dead right. Big data, who owns it, compatibility, compatibility between machines in relation to that data. It scares farmers. And in the EIP Agri that Luke talked about, we had a precision ag operational group as well, and that was coming out very, very forcefully. So they're issues that we have to address. And I suppose in terms of the Parliament and a colleague of Mairead's there, Jan Heitena and Angela McIntyre, they produced an own initiative report on precision ag and made it clear that in the next Common Agricultural Policy, they want to see that trapped and they want visibility around that. And that would have come through very strongly this week at the Outlook conference as well.
Fascinating, and we should talk about the CAP reform next. Before we do, I just want to see if there's any questions from the audience. Have any of you been inspired? Do you want to see any hands going up? Perfect. Sir, would you like to tell us your name, where you come from, and obviously remember, question means question.
Yeah, my name is Björn Hultin. I'm a Swedish public affairs consultant, and I wonder, don't we need to change our attitude towards GMOs? Can we really feed the whole planet without having all the tools?
Perfect. Brief and interesting. Have we got any more? Any other questions we can combine them in a round? Perfect. You're all feeling shy? It's true. It's been a big day with a lot going on. Right. Who wants to come in on GMOs? Luke, you go first.
So your question was mainly if we should have more GM to solve all our problems? That was it, no? I think that if you just look at statistics, I think that new inventions are not necessarily needed to feed the world. I mean, if you would just see it as a static dimension at this moment, because if I talk to a Vietnamese farmer, I mean, he produces maybe 20% of what somebody's producing here in the European Union. And of course, that's to do with climate and it's small scale, et cetera, but we can gain so much still at this moment without using new technologies, but using innovation is another thing. I mean, they need to innovate in the sense of how they use their nitrogen, how they, and this is all about knowledge transfer. How do they know how to be a better farmer? I think that's the most important thing to solve the food problem we are facing. And I think that I think it's good. I mean, I believe in technology and I believe in new developments, but we should not see one thing as like a panacea for everything in this world, because it's not, I think. I mean, it's just about knowledge. If these people know how to crop better, how to milk a cow better, then we would already be helped much more than putting all our money on technology. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And also, just to touch upon what Mairead already said on about population growth, etc. I mean, it's right. You know, this 2.5 billion more people are not going to live here. They're going to live in Africa and Asia. So if we are not able to beef up productivity there, and we are not able to come up with solutions there, and I'm not saying that we should do it, they should do them themselves as well, they will come here. I'm convinced of it. You can already see it. I mean, and if we don't take this serious, I mean, this is a much bigger geopolitical question, I think, and people will still be at our borders what's it called in English? I don't know, the sea underneath Italy. They will be there, and they will want to have a fair deal, because we have many advantages in the European Union. I mean, we have the best soil conditions, we have the best climate conditions. Also, in the long run, if we have climate change, the biggest problems will be in Asia and Africa. So if we don't solve these kind of issues, people will die and people will come here. It's simple as that.
Great. I mean, I guess the panel is called How Will Europe Grow? And yeah, we've obviously been talking about plants and crops and animals, but we're going to grow in terms of population as well. Lots of hands going up, so that's very good. I'll just take a moment to widen out this GMO question even further. Just maybe to again compare Europe with the US, there was a guy in a panel I was moderating earlier this week from Selectis. So it's a French company. They do gene editing technology, often to fight cancer, but also they have a soybean where they take out a gene to make it less fatty. And in the US, because they simply take the gene out, they don't put anything there instead, it's not classified as GMO because it's just something that's missing. It could happen in nature anyway. So I thought that was quite interesting that it had been edited, and for the US, they're like, oh, that's non-GM, whereas here, I think the European approach would be a little different. So maybe, Mairead, if you want to come in on the GM stuff, or whatever you fancy.
I think you've referenced the differences in mindset, but to the question, it was change our attitudes to GMO. There are many different attitudes to GMO across the European Union, within member states, and indeed within parishes of member states. But the truth is that Europe relies heavily on genetically modified protein supplies from outside our borders, and we use that to feed our animals, and we should acknowledge that that is the reality. But I know that many member states will not allow GM to be grown on their soil. For our country, Ireland, it's not an issue because there's nothing at the moment that could grow in Ireland. So in a way, we haven't had to deal with this, although there is research going on into blight-free potatoes using GM technology. And given our history of famine in Ireland, it's something that I would not have a problem with, but I know many others do. And I think, and this is a tough fact for big companies, I think the way that GM was introduced and, if you like, I was going to say sold, but that's not the word, but transmitted to the public didn't work. And people lost faith and trust in it. And the companies responsible need to acknowledge that, because it's been impossible to pull back that tide of suspicion about GM. And it is there, and we have to acknowledge that it is there. But in a sense, it might be old technology now. You've referenced taking out a gene, and we're not sure how Europe will classify these new developments. But I think that a lot of our normal practices in agriculture today were incredible innovations in the past, and they're now just normal. But I want to say something else that's a little bit harsh, but it's true. You know, people are hungry today in places where there is food because they have no money to buy food. So we also have to think of the food story as being part of an economic development story, that poor people don't have access to food, not because it isn't there, it's because they haven't the money to buy it. So I don't think it's just a question of producing more food and everyone will have access to it. I think there is another policy area that is not maybe the elephant in the room here, but it needs to be discussed as part of it. So I think that that's an absolutely vital part of this conversation. And again, on the migration question, I think it's really important that it is discussed here. Because if I were poor and hungry and my children were starving, and I could see on a mobile phone that in Sweden or Germany or France, that people had lots of nice things, I think I would risk life and limb to come here. So it's very important that President Juncker has acknowledged that we do have a duty, from selfish reasons perhaps, but also moral reasons, to allow development in those countries where they can develop and to give them access to the technologies that we have, and also to make sure that our policy choices don't have a negative impact as they did in the past. I mean, I recall being in Namibia when many years ago, when our common agriculture policy, particularly around beef, was harmful to their developing beef sector, and we changed that. And we need to be conscious, and it's a hard message sometimes for our own agriculture sector, but we need to be conscious that sometimes things we do have negative consequences for the developing world, and therefore in turn might have negative consequences on us when they come back in a circular way. And lastly, on the circular economy, which I don't think that term was used here, but agriculture of the past was very much about a circular economy, using what was produced and recycled. We're having a big discussion on fertilizer regulation in the Environment Committee. It's one of the big controversial topics. And I hope we get it right, because I think if we get it wrong, we're going to be criticised by farmers for regulation that doesn't work. So it's a warning to myself when I just remind myself of that.
Great, fantastic. First of all, don't be afraid to be controversial. Love it when panelists are controversial. It's the end of the day. Let's have a lively debate, guys. Everybody, don't forget to tweet. You can keep tweeting the interesting insights our panelists are sharing. Bernd.
Yeah, I'd really like to follow up on Mairead, and you touched many points. As far as GMO is concerned, of course, we at Bayer are convinced that it is a very important tool to support food security. However, we have to also accept that unfortunately, when this new innovation was introduced, a big mistake was done. The concerns of society were not taken serious. And this is, of course, something which I think we need to keep in mind when we talk about other new innovation, that we really make it very transparent and also address the concerns of the people. It's very difficult to explain the benefits of GMO to a consumer when you're talking about a resistance towards a certain herbicide. For the farmer, it is very important. He has a much easier job. He actually saves so many passes with his tractor. Yes, he improves his carbon footprint. He doesn't disturb the soil. And then you move already into a little problem, because normal society members believe that plowing is part of traditional farming, and therefore it's great, it's good, but it is not. And that requires, again, providing clarity, education. But when you actually can explain to a consumer, look, this rice grower in Vietnam is now able to continue producing rice in the Mekong Delta despite salty water, which is an increasing problem, because he's actually benefiting from a new variety which actually make the plant more resistant towards salt. That is then much easier. Very important is developing markets, agriculture in developing markets, and we need to really address that. It is our joint responsibility, not only the industry, but also the politics, to really make sure that we do whatever we can to support agriculture in those countries, because they need to become more self-sufficient. It's no long-term target. It can't be a long-term goal to actually keep providing them food via donations or exports. And that we have now put also on our forefront, fostering, supporting agriculture in developing countries. And we are also a strong believer that we need to do that with partnerships. And I'm not only talking about fertilizer companies or seed companies, I'm talking about, yes, microfinancing, I'm talking about the food chain. Access to market for the smallholder is of vital importance for him to or her to get a better price, and also to get an increased standard in living, and that's very important.
Great. Helena?
In Sweden, we have very few GM crops, if we have any, and we don't even buy the GM soya. But the Swedish farmers, we have the view of the GM as a technique, and the technique isn't bad or good. It's the result of the technique that you have to value. So you can value the results you get from using the technique. And I would say you have to value them in the three aspects of sustainability. Then you know if it's a good GM or a bad one.
Great. And Tom?
Just obviously to support the other speakers, in relation to what Mairead has said, she's absolutely spot on. I mean, politically, you look at this, member states will not give an opinion in terms of GM events. And we've seen it over the last 2 years. It has had to go to the College of Commissioners to get clearance, 19 or 20 events. That's the political reality that we're dealing with. That's the first point. The second point, again, to confirm what Mairead has said, we have a dependency on soy to the tune of about 30-odd million tonnes in Europe, imported. That's a reality, protein source. You know, the Paris Basin may be the best part of the world to grow wheat. Brazil, South America might be the best part of the world to grow soy, or parts of North America. So that's a reality of it. Then in relation to the point that's been made about Africa, because it came up on yesterday and the day before at the Outlook conference as well, which I suppose is no surprise. The first thing I'd say is this. This time last year, a major decision was made, which has been hugely helpful in that respect. And Ray touched on it, and that's the whole concept of export refunds. At the WTO in Nairobi, in Kenya last December, export refunds, export support is a thing of the past. And that's particularly important because, let's be honest about it, you know, the Common Agricultural Policy in the past, product was being dumped into those markets, and it had an adverse impact. And there's no point in anybody saying anything else. And refunds were a big part of that. The other thing I'd say is that an issue that has to be thought about as well is food waste. Yeah. I mean, 30% of food we have is actually wasted, which we have to think about as well in that sense. And also, you know, the support that we give Africa by way of duty-free access, etc., and also serious financial support. Now, yesterday, Friesland Campina were on the top table. You know, Friesland is, I think, is the 4th biggest dairy player in the world, might be the biggest processor of milk in the world. They were very clear in relation to what they're doing in Africa by way of adding value. And they see opportunity there. And there's a corporate social responsibility element to it as well. And other companies are doing likewise. So I suppose from a policy perspective, migration, yes, of course. The ability of people to feed themselves, yes, of course. A recognition of an agricultural policy that can't have an adverse impact. And I think that was recognised as well in the Valletta Summit there last year, which, you know, sort of opened the way for that as well. And I don't think anybody this time last year expected that refunds would be a thing of the past.
Yeah. Great. I see we've got a question here. If Joanna, you want to come over, Adam.
Just two questions. The first one is that we must eat and we must breathe. This is all. It's possible that 3 big companies in all over the world have the production of pesticides, 65%, and seeds. It's Monsanto, it's one, another one is Chinese, and the third one it's American. Is the first question. What do you think of globalization of the companies in the world? The second one is the big distance from the farmers and from the other side of the administration who made the law, etc., etc. At the local, at the regional, at the national, at the level of the European Union and the global means. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? Because I will take them all now. Oh, perfect. We've got one here as well.
Thank you very much. Sigrid Schrammel from the European Centre of Workers' Questions. You said earlier that the farmers need to make a living from their products. And as a consumer, I would like to support that idea. But it's very difficult as a consumer because there's no transparency on prices. I can go to buy at Lidl or Aldi milk in the Tetra Pak for 40 cents, and I can buy a milk 1 liter in a bottle for €1.10. But I don't know the difference. I don't know how much is going to be given to the farmer, and where the rest disappears somewhere in the chain between the farmer, the production, and the consumer. So I would like to have more transparency on that. And as regards GMO, I would like to have, as a consumer, labeling, so I can decide what kind of product I would like to buy and to eat.
Great. That is a really good point. I was at an event the other day with Commissioner Hogan. We were talking to an Italian SME who made this amazing cheese, and he he gave them some pretty robust questions about how they paid for their milk. I have to say, as a moderator, it was a joy to watch. So we have 15 minutes left. We've got 5 panelists. We've got 2 questions there. I propose that we go around 3 minutes each, try and wrap it up. So, yeah, tackle the questions, some great questions. Global scale, these big companies, price transparency, concerned consumers, what role do they have to play? So if you can wrap that up into 3 minutes, you'll all be great panelists. What order shall we go in? Yeah.
I suppose Byra will have a view, but I think it's a good question.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a good question. And you know, when you add those numbers together, the combined value of those, be it acquisitions or mergers, somewhere around $240 billion. And that will lead to concentration. About 60% of the seed and crop chemicals to farmers will be in the hands of 3 companies, assuming it happens in that respect. So obviously, you know, as policymakers, we have to consider how concentration of the sector will impact on pricing power. Well, I thought you were talking about, I thought you were talking in terms of the mergers of, you know, our Bayer acquiring Monsanto, and maybe I picked up wrong. Obviously, she has to. My understanding was you were raising questions about the fact that there were 6 chemical companies affected between mergers and acquisitions becoming 3, and you wanted to get the panel's view in relation to that. That's what I'm responding to. So to start again, what I'm saying is the combined value of those is about 240 billion together. So it's very sizable. Concentrated about 60% of the seed and the chemicals. Then it's about the impact, the pricing impact is going to have, and you know what it means for farmers in terms of their availability for seed and crop protection products at competitive prices. And I think all I can say from a Commission perspective is it's in the hands of Commissioner Vestager, Competition Commissioner, and she has said that, you know, she needs to make sure that the proposed mergers, acquisitions don't lead to higher prices or less innovation of those products. That's the position. So where it goes with DG Comp will evolve over time. I know Bayer are very clear in relation to what they say. They talk about ultimately driven by research and innovation and the ability to do more in that sphere. And there's no doubt that there is a requirement for that. But as I say, at the end of the day, it's about availability, it's about pricing, and it's about choice. As regards the GM end of it, I mean, we could be talking about GMs until the cows come home, as they say in Ireland. But at the end of the day, I've dealt with GM as regards our exposure for it, our dependency on protein sources, the position member states have taken as regards no opinion, and the fact that the college have had to make decisions in terms of approving GM events. So that's all I have to say.
Perfect. It's very clear. Luc.
Yeah, to respond to the questions and also some remarks being made. First, I would like to comment on what you said about Friesland Campina. I mean, I think that if you look at, it was already touched upon, that development assistance is not the major income source anymore for African and Asian countries. We tend to think that, but it's not, because it's foreign direct investment. And if I walk around in Vietnam or other parts of Asia, what really strikes me is that I see a lot of Australian, a lot of companies from the United States, but I don't see always the companies like Friesland Campina sharing their knowledge and investing in plants and in people there. So I think that there's major opportunities, and I think we should try to really push our European companies to go there, because there's a win-win situation. I mean, people can benefit from our knowledge, and at the same time we can also make a profit from earning money there. Then upon the concentration, this is a personal note, but what I read about, for example, the mergers is what really worries me is the fact that we have now combinations of seed companies with pesticide companies mingling, are glowing together. So which makes it a little bit hybrid, because then you have situations where it would be better to have a pest-resistant crop, but at the same time you're also selling certain pesticides, which you also want to sell. So what are you going to choose as a company? And what is best for the public interest? I think that's a very difficult and delicate situation, and I think that's also for me not to give an answer to, but I think really government should look more at certain ceilings of concentration of in certain sectors, because I think if you talk about innovation, innovation is not served by monopolies. It's not. It's been proven that it's not. Yeah. So I think we should be very careful in that sense. And talking about more transparency, I like that idea, but the downside is that farmers are with many, and if they give up all their costs, their prices, what they're putting into their products, who's going to benefit economically from it? I mean, if everybody knows what you're making and how much it costs to make, how do I make sure that I get a right price still? Because if I produce like a cost price of 26 cents, then I would be a buyer. I would say, okay, I'll give you 27. So transparency is a good thing, and especially on products, I think, but we should be careful. And then the last remark about consumers, I think that's the beauty of innovation and digitalization. There are a lot of nice and good developments which are much more on local level. I know a very important one, Hello Farmer, is in the Netherlands. You can go with a bike, you bike through the fields, and you put your phone, he knows where he is, and you scan, you show like a certain area, and then it says, oh, this is spinach. It's being harvested at that time, and it will be in the stores over there, and you can sell it, you can buy it there. And people like that kind of idea, being closer to the product they buy. But I think that's the beauty of innovation and digitalization. There are a lot of opportunities also to bring farmers and consumers closely together.
That sounds great. So I swipe right if I see a particularly tasty cheese, right? Helena.
Well, I can only agree that monopoly is not good for business. It puts the farmer in a very bad spot when it comes to monopoly. If it is the one who we buy fertilizers or seed from, it's also a problem when it comes to retailers. If they are too few and too big, that will pressure us between two very big sides. And I can see that for a long time the market has driven the food to be more anonymous. You don't know where it comes from, who's produced it, and things like that. And I see a big change in Sweden. It's a big change, and I see it in Europe too. That consumers want to know where the food comes from, and they. I think that is one of the innovation we can see in the future. Find new ways to connect the farmer and the consumer in a good way. You had one example in a big scale. You can also have it in a small scale. I think we will have both. And I can also see that historically the farmer is the producer of commodities. And that's a bad spot in the chain, I can tell you. But I think in the future, we will not only sell products or commodities, we will also sell services. It can be services, environmental services. It could be the kind of the way we produce things in. If someone tells us what does it cost you to produce this kilo of something, you also have to take into account the services we provide doing that, and we will have to get paid for that too.
Very good point. Perfect. Bernd.
As far as the consolidation is concerned, I can only speak on behalf of Bayer, of course. Our desire is to further improve our services to the farmer. We, as I mentioned before, we need a continuous flow of innovation because climate change, other environmental changes will also in future put pressure on us to provide new solutions. We see resistance developments in various crops against various indications, etc. At the same time, the ever-increasing regulatory standards require us to invest a lot of money also to maintain our solutions, our portfolio, which we right now are offering. And to be able to also in future provide adequate innovation for increasing challenges, We decided to acquire Monsanto because also the portfolio fits very well. It will help us to provide in future integrated offers, but even more important, also digital developments. We do see really here the future to help farmers to be able to, in a much more precise way, let's say, apply their inputs, opportunities to reduce costs, but also to further support the environment. And Monsanto is a leading company in this respect because some of the acquisitions which you've mentioned, and it fits very well also with our belief what we need to really support and focus our innovation on in the future. That's the reason why we buy Monsanto. At the same time, we definitely also believe in that the farmer needs to have a choice, whether it is GMO in countries where GMO is registered or still tends to lean more towards conventional crops. That choice has to be there, and we want to provide solutions for both components. And at the same time, we also believe that GMO, yes, the consumer has the right to know whether it is a GMO-based food crop or not. He's buying a GMO-based food. So yes, that transparency also has to be there. But again, there will be still substantial choices as far as seed access is concerned. We have many, many, many breeding companies in Europe, around the world, and they will be also very innovative, and I personally have no concern that there will not be enough choices for the farmer also in the future, definitely not. But for us, fantastic opportunity to pull together innovation and research and to be even more in a position to provide solutions.
Great. Now we're getting very close to the reception where you can all go out, do some networking and enjoy a drink. Before I call on Antonio to give some closing remarks, I'm going to call on Mairead to close this panel.
Okay, to the first question of the concentration, I have huge concerns because I've already written to the Commissioner about this. I'm very interested in your response, and I think there's some merit in what you're saying. But I think when my gut instinct is to be concerned, then I really believe my gut instinct. And I think because I try and represent the people who elect me, who are both consumers and farmers, they're also concerned. And I think big corporations and companies have to listen to those concerns because they feed into this anti-globalization concern that governments are no longer in control, that you are so big that nobody can regulate you. So I think, you know, I know you think that's not true, but that is the sense, and I listen to my constituents all the time, but also the choice issue is important, and Tom referenced that. And I don't like concentration at processing level, at input level, or land ownership level, but maybe there is some merit in the arguments you propose. Then to the question of consumers, I think there is a growing interest in consumers, usually better off consumers, because you have the money to make these choices. Other consumers with families to feed will buy whatever they can afford to buy. So I think it's not quite as simple as that. I like the idea of transparency. I have fought to get rid of unfair trading practices in the food supply chain, and we're very encouraged that the Commission have taken this up. We got 600 votes in favour of measures to tackle this issue. I know that supermarkets come to me now anxious about this. That's quite good, actually, because it means that they're listening, and I think they will respond. I think we're going to see big improvements in this area, and I think it will make the supply chain more sustainable and fairer, and fairness is something that I think we need to fight for. And labelling is there. If there is a GM product, it has got to be labelled, and the lady behind thinks we don't need GM, and some believe that we do. It's interesting that the technology in the medical sphere we accept, but we don't in food. And we don't accept it because those who started it out did a really bad job on convincing us that they were doing it for the right reasons, because there was a claim that it was going to feed the world. And frankly, that was, in my view, a dishonest claim. It wasn't. It was a technology that would do many things, but I don't think it answers that question. On a completely different end note, rural landscape and access to nature and green and all of those good things, in my view, will have an economic value, maybe after my time, because we know that health improves, mental health is improved by people having access to nature. So the services that you rightly talk about, I think will be part of that. And there is a very nice thing happening around social care farming, which I think will grow, where we are seeing farms and access to activities in the countryside, helping people as a therapy, people with a disability or with a mental health issue, of helping them recover. And I think that is fantastic. And in all this discussion about sustainability, I think this is part of a societal need and demand, which we should also put into the equation and be part of the story. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So what I would like to do is I'd like to call on Antonio López-Istúriz White, who is the Secretary General of the EPP and the Secretary Treasurer of the Wilfried Martens Centre, to give us some closing remarks. And I'd like you to, should we stay here? That's probably easiest, right? None of you have to.
Good afternoon, everybody. First, I would like to tell you that I have a hope. Mine is a little bit less ambitious than Obama's. My only hope is that you disconnect the timer. But don't worry, I will be brief. First of all, as Secretary Treasurer of the organization, I would like to thank our sponsors, AT&T, Google, Bayer, Microsoft, UPS, and Disney Corporation. President Zurinda, Tommy, Roland, staff of the Martens Center, you have done a hell of a job. And this is a fantastic setting that reminds me that we have to look into the future. And thank you for that. Thank you to the panelists. I would like to thank you all. And, Luke, Bernd, Helena, Tom, Francis, thank you very much for the direction of this debate. I would like to, if you will excuse me, a little mention to my colleague, McGuinness. She has taken some time, you know. I'm going to tell you a little secret. She's campaigning. She's one of our candidates to become President of the European Parliament from the PP. Thank you for taking this time from your campaign to be with us tonight. I think it is impossible to summarize all the interesting things that we have heard today about so many different topics. But let me draw 3 general lessons for all of us. First, technology is transforming the world around us at a growing pace. It affects the way we live, the way we study, the way we trade, the way we communicate. And it is usually disruptive. It puts into question long-cherished assumptions. It makes communities more fragmented and fluid, and crucially, it can destroy jobs in the industries that it challenges. Responsible politicians, there are some of us, and policymakers have tough choices to make here. In defense of acquired positions and status, we can try to hold the flow of change through artificial restrictions. This is what favor especially populists. Or we can allow this process of creativity disruption to take place freely and accept the ensuing changes. To a very large extent, history shows us that these changes have usually been for the better. Back in time, the development of new means of transport, such as trains or cars, hugely disrupted the business of horse-drawn carriages, sentencing many professional categories to extinction. Similarly, the development of electric lights entirely destroyed the once flourishing candle industry and made many candle makers unemployed. Are we to conclude that the world would have been better off if we had artificially restricted the development and commercialization of trains, cars, and electric devices? Obviously not. This lesson is still valid for today's technological developments. The second lesson is related to this, and it has to do with regulation. When the first disruptive effects of the new technological developments became evident, we politicians start facing pressure to regularize it, which usually means stopping it. The arguments used are usually very altruistic. It is in the name of fairness and the general interest that unfair competition should be prevented. This approach is misguided. Regulating a new technological industry in its infancy usually means that many of the benefits it could deliver will never be seen. They will never be seen because potentially positive developments will be artificially prevented from coming into existence. Too often in Europe, we are ready to regulate technology out of existence. This is a major difference between Europe and the United States, and it partly explains why we are less successful as a harbor of technology-led economic growth. We need to control our risk aversion and be more open to the development of new industries that for a while, until they stabilize and fully display their positive or negative effects, might have to be left lightly regulated or even completely unregulated. While we should embrace technological change without fears, ignoring its social and economic disruptiveness would be a grave mistake. And as the poet said, everything in moderation, including moderation. And this brings us to the third and last lesson, especially important for decision makers. We should do our best to mitigate the most negative effects of technological advances. Through targeted policy interventions, we should consider compensating some of the losers and defending some of the social bodies that technological change can undermine. For example, families and local communities. Make no mistake, it is for the sake of progress itself that some checks on it are sometimes a necessary evil. When people feel that change is too rapid, that their way of life is threatened, that their income is decreased, there is a serious risk of a political backlash. This is certainly one of the explanations for the rise of anti-establishment populist movements. We have experienced 2 decades of dramatic technological and economic transformations. Many people are at loss and they are ready to support populist political proposals. If we ignore their fears, we will not help progress, but encourage these negative political trends with potential catastrophic consequences. To conclude, the main message we can draw from today's discussion is that we should allow and embrace technological change, and we should not overload it with excessive regulatory burdens. However, we should also be aware of its potentially negative effects and try to mitigate them. If we manage to follow these simple rules in our daily work, we can both reap the benefits of technological change and avert its worst economic, social, and political effects. Thank you all. Thank you, the panelists, and for transmitting these powerful ideas these 2 days, and thank you all very much for taking part on this event on the name of the Wilfried Martens Center. Thank you.